Breath in, and another. One final double breath. Yeah, part of the work that we do with young people is to make sure that we're, in a place of regulation. Anytime a young person comes to us, you're not sure where they're coming from, right? What just happened at home? What just happened on the bus? What just happened in their peer group? So as the adults in the room, it's our work to help get them regulated. So just out of curiosity, how many of you in this room have heard the term creative youth development? Great. Okay, we've got some hands up. So a couple months ago, I wrote an article about creative youth development, and I titled it, "Youth Work Isn't as Sweet as You Think, and It's More Important Than You Might Imagine." And the reason I titled it that way is we tend to put youth work in two buckets. It's either how sweet is it to see, kids playing instruments in malls and in parks, and aren't they just adorable, right? And the people who work with them, what saints. And then the other side of youth work, especially youth work that involves working with teenagers, historically marginalized teenagers, we tend to put in a bucket over here that's scary. That's those kids, right? Those kids are too far gone. These are last chance kids. Like, I don't know if I want my kid hanging out with those kids, but I'm glad somebody's working with them, right? The truth is, creative youth development falls somewhere in the middle, right? And what most people don't realize about this sector, most of this sector is structured as a nonprofit organization. And we really serve many functions for our community. So in a lot of ways, we provide social services. We are connecting youth and their families to resources that they need. We are childcare in many ways, depending on how old or young the students are. Most families are two-parent households that are working, or one-parent households that are working. They need some support before and after school and on the weekends of caring, compassionate adults who are looking out for their kids. We serve in the education realm, right? We're supporting with homework and academic success. We are getting young people ready for careers. I tell people all the time, creative youth development work is so critical because in a blink of an eye, these folks are your employees, right? And so we are getting the next generation ready to enter the workforce. We are drug prevention, and we're drug prevention programs, and so we are public safety programs. Anytime a young person is in the care of creative youth development organizations, they are doing something that they love more than being in a circumstance where they would have to change the way they feel, right? And so they get to come with us and maybe change the way they feel, but they get to do that through creative expression and being around caring, compassionate adults. Mental wellness is a service that Creative Youth Development provides. Our organization has a therapist on staff. We do peer-to-peer mental health support and addiction support. We are arts organizations, right? So often creative, we start with creative. That's where young people are. They want to be building and creating something, something in the arts. And so we're definitely in creative expression. So when you put that all together, this is some of the most necessary work in the community. And a lot of people aren't necessarily familiar with it, but every single one of us has been impacted in some way through creative youth development organizations, from the youth you're around, your own children, and some of the adults that you work with, pray with, congregate with every day have probably benefited from creative youth development as young people. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I got into this field. First of all, I'm Jami Duffy, and I am the longtime executive director of Youth on Record, which we'll talk about in a minute. I am a fifth generation Coloradan, and I myself am an artist, and I am a very proud aunt of Lindy and Connor, who are 10 and 12. So I grew up in a house where my mom did childcare. My parents were high school sweethearts, and they were teenage parents. And my mom really wanted to be with her children every day and also needed to bring income into the home. So she chose childcare as her profession. And I lovingly, my mom's probably watching right now, and I lovingly like to say that from the age of 5, I was employed at my mom's daycare. And so I was changing diapers when I was 5, and I was making sandwiches, and I was leading arts and crafts programs, and I had all these little baby ducklings around me. And I learned in my mom's daycare, she just retired after 40 years. And I learned in my mom's daycare that all kids need structure, they need crafts, they need hugs, they need some creative expression, they need play, they need rules, they need boundaries, and they need a lot of snacks. And so I grew up doing that work. And my dad, who is a chief with Douglas County Sheriff's Department, he has always been a major youth advocate. So he started as a coach. He coached my brother's sports and my sports and my brother until he graduated from high school. He did some youth ministry in the church that we grew up in, Bellevue Acres Church in Morrison. He started the school resource program in Douglas County and is still the board chair for the Juvenile Assessment Center. So as much as I would like to say I fell into this work, the more I tell this story, obviously creative youth development is in my blood. I was raised that, just knowing that young people's needs are all of our needs and that we all need to do our part to take care of a community of children. And so after I graduated from DU, and I was a political science and journalism major and a first-generation college graduate, I was 100% convinced I was going to be an immigration lawyer or a political reporter on Capitol Hill. And to get there, I thought, well, I'll spend some time. I want to see the world, and I want to make a difference, and so I'll be a Peace Corps volunteer. And so I put my application in, and I waited for 18 months to get accepted. And I really thought they were going to put me in, I don't know, like a health sector. But based on my credentials, you guessed it, they put me in youth development. And so I was a preschool teacher in Nicaragua. I was around kids every single day. And I have to tell you one story of how much I was around children in Nicaragua. So I was the first volunteer in my community. There were 200 people. And so I was just guarded, right, there by the community, meaning I wasn't on guard. They were watching me like a hawk. And so I would go on this hike every day. And the town mother, her name was Marina. She was very strict. I remember her running to my house after I went on a hike. And she said, "What are you doing? Where have you been?" And I said, "Well, I was on a hike." And she said, "Don't you ever go on a hike in these woods without protection? And you're never allowed to leave your house without Ephraim." And so she ushered in Ephraim, and he was this big, and he was 5 years old, and he had a machete. And he was my guardian the entire time I lived in Nicaragua, and he's about 25 years old now. So after the Peace Corps and after doing all of that work in youth development, I did a lot of nonprofit work, and then I found myself working at DU, and I was coordinating the entrepreneurship, international, and social justice programs. And I was working with 18 to 21-year-olds. 4-year-olds and 18 to 21-year-olds are just my favorite age of humans. I think they all are really, really open, really, really fun. And so when I was working with my students, it was around the first Obama election, and they were super into this band called the Flowbots. Have any of you heard of this band? Okay. So this band was really politically active around the elections and was really putting out some interesting protest music, and my students loved it. And when you work in creative youth development, if your students love something, you find it for them, right? So I started looking up this band, found out they were local, said I got to get the students connected to them. Lo and behold, I did. That's where I met my best friend, Laura Bond, who at the time was the executive director of their nonprofit organization, flowbots.org. And so I got my students connected, and during that time, it became really clear that Laura and I were going to work together, and that eventually it was, maybe part of my dharma to run this organization that is now Youth on Record. And when I came in, I, really wanted to focus on young people, creative youth development. That's what I knew. And that's where I thought we could make the highest impact. So I want to share with you a little bit about Youth on Record's impact over the 14 years that I've been there. So at Youth on Record, we're a nonprofit organization here in Denver. We serve close to 3,000 young creatives in Denver Metro, 11 to 24 years old. And we really believe that all young people deserve access to free creative youth development programs. So all of our young people get to come into our programs for free. We are both in school and out of school. So we teach classes 5 days a week in middle and high schools. Those classes are taught by professional local musicians and poets. And all of those classes are for credit. So the education part of creative youth development and academic success part, we're working on, right? We're a graduation incentive program, providing classes for young people that they love and they're engaged with so that they'll come to school more and more. Come on in, welcome, if you're coming back. No, they got scared. Oh, they're coming back. We're recruiting from hallways. That's a tactic in the schools, by the way. So we teach in the schools, and then we built a full youth media studio where we house all of our young creative ecosystem programming. So our youth media studio is 5,000 square feet in La Alma, Lincoln Park. Do you all know the Buckhorn Exchange or the 10th and Osage Light Rail Stop? Santa Fe Arts District, we're right around there. So we have 5,000 square feet. We partnered with the Housing Authority. And I can't stress enough that when you're working with young people, they need a place. Think about right now, when you were a teenager, you did not really want to be in your house with your parents, correct? No, you did not. Unless you were one of those kids who had that awesome house where like the basement was yours and your parents never went down there. I was not one of those kids. And so every young person needs a place to go, right? We've got rec centers, we've got churches, right? Youth groups, and boys and girls clubs. Youth on Record is that, right? We have this incredible studio. We have a full recording studio there. So students are able to, produce albums, work with professionals in the community, work with artists they respect and admire. We have state-of-the-art equipment. Our young people produce their own youth music festival, which I'll make sure you're all invited to. They produce their own open mic night once a month, which you're also welcome to come to. So really, it is an ecosystem. They're learning job skills. They're creating their own work. They're working with artists in the community who are teaching them what they know. And what our young people are saying from being in our school programs and being in our out-of-school time programs is what they're really, really getting from this work is the number one thing they say when they're surveyed is they have a sense of community. Really important right now, especially post-COVID, right? We've got to get young people back in person together. They need it. They really need each other. So the next thing they say, this warmed my heart so much. This is the first time in our survey they said this. They said, I really like coming to Youth on Record because that's where my friends are. And friendship, and these are some of the kids who come to Youth on Record are tough. So I don't know that they would ever say out loud, yeah, that's my best friend. But that's where their best friends are. They also say that it's the only place they feel like they can be completely themselves. So anytime we're doing, creative youth development professionals, our job is to create spaces and environments where young people can be the fullest expression of themselves, right? They also say they're learning something, right? They're learning new skills. They're learning job skills. And then I can't advocate enough in CYD, our sector. Anytime we can offer programs where our young people are being paid, we do that. So especially when you're working with historically marginalized young people, and we consider that to be BIPOC students, Black, Indigenous people of color, LGBTQ students with disabilities, and young women, because young women of all races and ethnicities are marginalized in music. And so for many of our students, the majority of our students, their families live below the federal poverty line. And they can't just necessarily hang out. They need to make some money. And so we really try to make sure that in our programs, for many of our students, there's an opportunity to intern. And then that internship turns into an apprenticeship. And then that apprenticeship ideally will turn into a career. So where we hope to be in the next 10 years is our state's largest training organization for the creative industries. And the creative industries is the 4th largest in Colorado. So we want to be that great pipeline for young people who are doing this work. Have you all met Enrique, who got my laptop set up? He does all this stuff. He's the best. He came in and saved me today. Enrique's in the creative industries, right? He's doing all of this AV, the sound, the lighting. So not everything in the creative industries is I'm performing on stage, but I'm making that happen. So any conferences, conventions, you all go to church, right? You know that music and sound and lighting is an important part of ceremony and worship. And so that's creative industries. So that's where we're going at Youth on Record, and we're gonna have some time in the end to ask me some questions about that. But now we're going to move into the workshop part of our lesson. So one thing is, we're going to be doing group work. So can I invite you to either this table with these lovely gals or this you don't have to move that far. I just don't want you to be on your own in the group work. Okay. So when I think about just what a blessing it's been to be around young people my whole life and to be a professional in this work, the biggest gift I have received is this, the gift of remaining open. So teenagers drive culture. They are the ones. Where they go, so will all of us. There is no stopping that moving train. You all drove culture when you were teenagers. Every generation that I have worked with, so now I look at, if I don't count my mom's daycare kids, as a professional in creative youth development, my young students are now 37 years old. And so I have seen multiple generations of teenagers come in. Well, I don't think they're technically generations, sub-generations, come in and drive culture. And what it's done for me is I just have very little resistance about what's coming now. I am just riding this wave and trying to have fun doing it because it's coming, it's here, the future is now. And so I want to take us through an exercise that will kind of that will show you personally where you are. And maybe by the end of this, we all move a little bit into feeling a little bit more wee and less ooh about what's coming. And a couple things. So obviously we'll hold some confidentiality and some double confidentiality here, meaning, obviously we're, not necessarily going to share too much of what people share in this room. We're going to turn that off during the live stream. So if folks want to share something that's vulnerable, you're absolutely able to do that. And then if somebody shares something that's vulnerable, we're not going to ask them about it in the hallway unless they bring it up. And this is for you. So you don't have to share anything. You can just share on your notepad how you're feeling about the images I'm about to show you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a series of images several times, and we're going to do a little work around it. So the first time through, I just want you to pay attention to what's on the screen and then pay attention to what's in your heart, right? What's coming up for you, and just don't lie to yourselves, right? Like, you know, I think we're in a moment right now where we see things and we tell ourselves, I probably should be okay with that. Right? I think we've all felt that. I should be okay with that, even though I'm sort of like, I don't know how I feel about that. So this is just an opportunity to just sort of be honest with yourself about what your reaction is to these images. Okay. Okay. Now, it was very likely that some of those images were in the green for you, right? They felt comfortable. They might be nostalgic. You feel a sense of peace when you see them, or serenity. You also might say to yourself when you see that image, I know that, or I love that, or I can see myself in that, right? That's a big one, why that might be in the green. Yellow images, they're a little neutral, right? They're non-threatening. You might be thinking to yourself, I don't know this, but I'm okay with this, I think. And the big, bad, scary red, it brings up some fear, right? It feels like a threat. There could be some anxiety there. Some of the statements that have come up with these are, I'm not comfortable with this, or this is foreign to me. I don't know this. Welcome. You're welcome to come sit with us. And a big one is, I can't see myself in this, right? That feels threatening to us. So we're going to go through these again. And as our kids say, we have all the feels about these images, right? And I want you to be thinking about, what does your personal red feel like? And this is important because we're going to take this with us, right? My red doesn't feel like your red. Somebody's red might make them really angry, right? Somebody's red might make them really sad, right? So what does your red feel like? And then be thinking about what images are in your red category. So we're going to go through these again. We're going to go through them a little bit faster. This is my best buddy over here, and I know there's one image in there that's definitely in her red. We're going to talk about it afterwards. The least favorite movie on the planet. Okay, are we ready? What does my personal red feel like? And then pick your red images, because we're going to work with those. Okay, here we go. Oh, you certainly can write it down. Whatever works for you, right? If you're somebody who needs to write that down, you've got gadgets to write with. Is that what they're called? No, pens. So write it down if you'd like to, if that's how you want to reflect. There will be no quiz afterwards, so, okay. And back to Lucy. Okay, so remember, what does your personal red feel like, and what images are in your category? And remember, we're doing this like a creative youth development class. So in class, we would always have something visual, some sort of object of reflection. The one thing we're missing today, which I regretted on my way over, is when you walk in, we're always playing music. Okay, so this is going to be a time to share at your table, and then we're going to share as a group. So our first group share is, you have your objects, but I want you to think about something in your life that used to be red, but is now yellow or green, right? Something that used to give you maybe a little bit of anxiety or fear, or was really sort of like irritating, some sort of cultural trend. Let's put it in that category, that you've moved on, right? I'll give you an example for me. If you had shown me these slides when I was 17, the kids with all the piercings and tattoos, I would have been like, nah, right? Like, I was captain of the volleyball team. I was taught, my parents are watching that, kids with all the piercings and all the tattoos and all the hair colors, like, those kids were those kids, right? And I was not that kid. I have obviously moved on that, as have my parents, thanks to Youth on Record. And what moved me on that was meeting a lot of people with piercings and tattoos and colored hair and being like, these people are amazing. And if you see the Youth on Record staff, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So lived experience changed that for me. So think about something like that for you that was red, that's maybe yellow or green now, and then talk about it in your group, and then we'll have our table share out. So I'll give you a couple minutes to do that. Don't be shy. I love this conversation. I'm going to give you guys 30 more seconds because you just are just enjoying each other's company so much. This table over here is getting into 3D printed houses, and I love it. Okay, we're going to come back together, and I would love to invite two people to share a personal story of maybe something you've moved on that was red, that is now yellow or green. And if nobody wants to share, you want to share?
Say your question.
Just one or two people who would like to share their story about something in your life that was red that is now yellow or green. And you do not have to share with the full group. Then you want to share? So brave.
So as I went into the group when I was, I'm sorry.
Do you want this?
I think, are we? We're not live streaming this part?
Yes, we are.
Are you comfortable with that?
With this being live streamed, or
I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
So when I was younger and a Christian, I believed Jesus was the only way, the only truth, and the only life. And since then, through life changes, I converted to Islam for 7 years, just recently converted back to Christianity. My entire view of that has changed, and I'm much more universal and accepting of other religions, and I'm now helping to work in interfaith dialogue.
Beautiful. Yeah, that's a perfect example. Beautiful. Let's invite one or two more people to share something that was red for you that maybe is yellow or green now. Miss Laura, let's go here and then Laura.
you Comfortable? Yeah.
And can you say your name so I can know you? What was your name? Cheryl. Nice to meet you.
Hi, I'm Isaac.
Hi, Isaac. You make great eye contact. You're like star student. I appreciate it.
A red image for me was all the AI robots and
Yep.
technology. I'm a creative as well,
Yep.
and that conversation is kind of impeding on the field. But just hearing your words and being like, well, the wave's coming, ride it. I could shift that red more into a yellow and be like, well, what are the positives that can come from it?
Ooh,
that
did you see my next slide? This guy is an A+ student. He knows what's coming. Yes, hold that thought because that is exactly what we're about to do. I love that. And what kind of creative are you?
Dancer.
Ooh, I love it. Do you work with a dance company here?
Yeah, I teach with Celebrate the Beat. We're a nonprofit.
Awesome. Let's connect after.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yay. Okay, Laura, what's your... No, we're fine. We got plenty of time. Yeah.
So Jami mentioned there was one that would be a red for me, and she knows it is TikTok, which you may know. It's a social media platform that shows videos, really short form videos, and it's just one after another after another. And I'm a writer. I place a high value on sort of traditional reading and writing. When TikTok first came around, I was like, this is obviously the end of literacy.
She actually said that like every night.
And because they're so short, to me, it just was like, there's no attention span required. Like it just signaled like the end of literate civilization, obviously. I have come to appreciate that it's a tool that a lot of people are using to share information and connect with one another, to be creative, to be funny. They share recipes. There's all kinds of stuff. Jami loves it. It's her guilty pleasure. So I have opened myself up to realizing that I was, putting my own bias of sort of what's a legitimate communication tool onto something that's obviously resonating with millions of young people in particular.
That's great. Okay, so our next reflection is exactly what we were talking about. To pick one of the images that was read for you in our slide deck, just one, and write down why it was read for you, 5 reasons it was there for you, right? And then I want you, after you do that, to write 5 potentially positive attributes about it, right? So how might your red image make the world better for some? Maybe not for you right now, but for some. Could it advance society in any way? Or at minimum, is it maybe not as bad as you think? How could it be not as bad as you're imagining, right? So 5 reasons it's red, 5 reasons it's maybe not so terrible. couple of you to share one of the images from this slide deck and what you wrote about. Yes. And say your name so I can know who you are. And I've loved your giggles throughout the
The
entire
world can know me.
workshop.
My name is Johanna,
Hi, Johanna.
and I had a gut reaction. I couldn't figure out 5 reasons, but the slide of the 3D printing of the organs.
Yeah.
I looked at that and went, my first reaction was, oh, OMG.
Yep.
And then when it came around again, I thought, oh. And I thought, well, that could be really helpful. We have a paucity of organs, and perhaps if it was done with the appropriate, if it was done in a way that people wouldn't have to take transplant rejection drugs, that would be really
Interesting.
helpful.
Yeah, that's good thinking. Quick story about that. It's not quite an organ, but my dad just had a full knee replacement, and he had a knee replacement 15 years ago. He was a football player, so this is inevitable. And this time they 3D printed his knee. And the most 2023 statement of all time, they had to postpone his surgery by 3 weeks because his 3D printed knee was held up at customs, and that is true. But he has been, so he's a week and a half out of a full knee replacement, 62 years old. And because it's this 3D printed knee, his mobility is off the charts right now. And so I can see, it's like for all of us who are going to need that eventually, we're like, oh, what's that doctor's number? But so it certainly could help in recovery, like you said. What's another image up there that was for you? But yes, I have to hear your name. I love that bow tie.
My name's John, and the big red image was the 2050.
Yeah.
The buildings
Oof.
that looked like they were in Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And the thing that really turned me off was that it was like mid-60s when 65, 66, 67, somewhere in there, 2001 Space Odyssey came out.
Yeah.
That was the big deal. We ain't near that in 2001
Yeah.
because we've seen what has happened. I think it's pie in the sky. It's wishful thinking. That being said, that image is a sign of hope, progress. I put down everyone has to live somewhere. Maybe it's energy efficient. Maybe it can be made out of renewable materials. But I really think the environment is going to take a big hit if that's what we ascribe to in 2050.
Yeah. It's interesting. My employee, Haley, who is 25 years old, that was hers too. And it was very similar. And that being said, was also, well, maybe it will be more environmentally efficient. Maybe more people will be able to live there. But she, had a very similar reaction. And she's 25. That feels not like for her, she said, that feels like not like a place I want to live, So yeah, that's real. Let's invite one more person and then, yes. Unless we have another person burning to share their story. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Susan.
Hi, Susan.
And I picked out the Friends photo, the photo of the cast of Friends.
That was red for you?
Pardon me?
Was that red for you, Friends?
I had trouble. I mean,
I
none
love
of them
it.
were
That is
super red for me, but
an awesome answer.
if I had to pick one, then I thought, okay, well, on the negative side of that picture, there's no diversity.
Yep.
Privilege, cluelessness, entitlement, hoarding wealth. On the plus side, could be a baseline for change, unawareness, open to change, collaboration, and could become change makers.
I love it. What a brilliant answer. We actually have a young person in our office that Friends was on their red for the same reason. So you're woke, Susan. Anyone else want to share? Okay. So to wrap up the workshop, really thinking about remaining open. I will say that young people are not different than us. There's going to be things on there red. There's always things on there red. But what they have shown me is they just move a lot faster to yellow and green, right? And there's a levity there. And for me, what that's done in my life is it has created a little bit more levity. I feel a little bit more excited about the future than I ever have, even though some of that stuff is definitely, a little scary. But I am taking more of, isn't that interesting, and a curious approach to it, as opposed to just being afraid of it because it's new, or just being angry about it because it's new. And that is truly the biggest blessing I've had from working with young people since I was 5 years old. So really appreciate today. Want to make sure we have time for some Q&A. If you need to contact me, my email is up there. You are welcome to reach out, but I want to just open it up. We can talk about creative youth development. We can talk about my journey. We can talk about Youth on Record. We can talk about 3D printed organs, whatever's on your mind. So any questions out there for me? Yes.
Does Youth on Record do anything with software development?
Not yet, but that's a really good question. So we are kind of the A in STEAM. So the science, technology, engineering, and math, if you put A in there, we're the arts component. We do digital music production, but we aren't necessarily in tech yet. But I say yet because the world is open and everything is so intersectional now, and all industries are colliding right now. So if I was a betting person, I would say within the next 10 years, we'll offer something in that lane. Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
For the people.
It's for the live stream. Yeah.
So what about a syncretic relationship between creativity and social justice? Is there any thoughts of heading in that direction?
Yeah, we are a social justice organization. So we teach, no, I love that you brought that up. So, yeah, I mean, and the way we look at it is for our students who we're serving, their stories, their narratives, their history is in all of our classes, and their future is in all of our classes. So one of the classes we teach, for example, is called Identity, Power, and Music. It's a social studies curriculum that takes music as the object of reflection to reflect on the most pressing issues of our time. So we very much lead with that. We're very much, a welcoming and affirming organization, but beyond that, we are not afraid to address the hard issues. And I will tell you something. This has shifted. When Laura and I first started, we were doing this in the classroom, but that door was shut, right? It was like the teachers knew it, the principals knew it. This is before folks were really talking about critical race theory. So it's really interesting to me. I'll give another example. My parents brought up critical race theory to me. They were like, I don't know, what do you think? And I was like, guys, that's what Youth on Record's been teaching for 14 years. And that moved from red to green to them immediately, just hearing that. They were like, oh, right, because they were hearing all the scary things about it. That's what, so we have been in that lane for a really, since our inception. And yeah, our belief is that that's incredibly important. So when folks started talking about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion work, non-bias work, we've always said that's very much a part of our sort of structural DNA, especially because that's who our founders, the members of the FOBOTs are. And so that's always been a part of our work. But wonderful question. That is not true for all creative youth development and success organizations, but I would say more of them than not are doing that work. And now it's unavoidable in a good way. What other questions do we have? Yes.
So is it for the outreach for the kids to come to this, is it really just the one location?
Wonderful question. Thank you for asking that. No, we are all over Metro Denver. So when we teach in the schools, we go to the schools. So we're right now at 9 school locations, 5 days a week, 3 classes a day. We also do, we'll do some outreach models at rec centers, and, we'll show up at different community events. Our youth media studio is at one location right now, at 10th and Osage. We are working to see what's the opportunity to have satellite locations. One thing to be aware of as we're thinking about our young people and we're thinking about elected officials and policies and all that fun stuff is I want to hear more people talking about transportation for young people. We actually just applied for buses and vans to get us access to more young people, because the truth is the geography of Denver, we're really spread out here, right? And we don't have a central transportation system. So to cut through the city. So it is hard for young people to get places. So satellite pop-ups is something that's in our model for the next 3 years. So that is a wonderful question. And that's part of the reason that Laura and I push really hard to go into the schools, because you can't just, it's not an if you build it, they will come. That is not community organizing. That is not outreach. You need to go where the population you seek to serve is every day. And for us, that's the schools. Yeah, great question. Other questions? We got about 5 more minutes. I'm so proud of us on time. It feels like just the perfect amount. Questions, comments, thoughts? Yes.
When you're in the schools, are you primarily after-school programs, or are you embedded in the curriculum?
Great
through
question.
Professional development.
So when we're in the schools, we're embedded in the curriculum, and we're teaching 4 credit classes. So we're either coming in and teaching our music classes, right? So our musicians are teaching music fundamentals. We do a lot of digital audio production. So music production and podcasting is something that the students are really interested in. So we teach that for credit as electives. And then we have our identity, power, and music, and our identity, power, and poetry classes, which are social studies classes. So we tend to be in schools. Denver Public Schools in Aurora, they're interesting. They're autonomous. So that means the principals really dictate what happens in those schools. And so that's why there's no uniform cuts to music or uniform investment in music. It's pretty school by school to do with what they want with their budget right now. And so we work really closely with principals who want these programs in their schools. And we tend to be at the schools who have some of, who teeter more on the older students in the district with the least amount of credits. So really supporting those students in graduating high school. And in Denver, you can be in high school until you're 21. Mm-hmm. So we're really working on those credits. We do have a host of out-of-school time programs as well, so it's a mixed model. So the schools are our biggest recruitment tool for our youth media studio. The kids hear about us in the schools, of course, and then they come to our youth media studio for our out-of-school time programs. Those take place 6 days a week. 51 weeks a year. So we work around the clock.
Jami, can you just tell us a little bit about how people both here and online can engage with Youth on Record? I've been following you for a long time, but I don't think many people that are here have known about you before.
Yes. So our website is youthonrecord.org. And if you're on social media, you can follow us, Youth on Record, on all the socials. Couple ways to get involved. So this month happens to be what we call Music Matters March. When you go on our website, you're going to see about 100 different businesses that are supporting Youth on Record this month. So you could, maybe shift where you get your coffee this month and go to the place that is contributing to Youth on Record, so you can support the businesses that support us. You can, of course, support us financially. So we have multiple levels of giving, and you're able to do that. Part of our work at Youth on Record is community activation. And so what we love to tell our young people is this community of adults has your back. And so one of the ways to do that is to listen to the content they create. So on our website, you will see, and I'll make sure I get this to you so you can email it out, but our students produce their own podcast. They interview elected officials. They recently interviewed a 9-year-old entrepreneur who started his own slime company. He's doing great. He's doing great. It's an amazing podcast. And so listening to their content is a way we can support our young people. So their music, their podcasts are all online. You can also join us for free at our many of our events we do. So you can come to open mic and hear what this generation is creating. And I'll tell you something interesting that's going on, and this is new. Young people, there is a resurgence of folk music right now. Every young person who comes to the Youth Media Studio is sitting on a stool singing a folk song that they wrote. It's happening. It's really, really, really interesting to see. So that's first Friday of every month. You can come to the Youth Media Studio, grab a slice of pizza, listen to the kids perform. So those are a couple ways to get involved, but really be thinking about their content. And then when you leave here, I always encourage people, if you have a young person in your life and a teenager in your life, pull them aside and just listen to them. That is helpful for our work. And then I will say politically pushing our elected officials on more resources for creative youth development, more transportation, and not new youth programs, but supporting the youth programs that exist. An organization like a Youth on Record, we have to apply for 5 times as much funding as we get. So we don't necessarily need new organizations. We need to support, we're not the only ones, we need to support all of the incredible folks, us, Street Fraternity, there's amazing groups working with young people. So just supporting youth in general supports us. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jami.
Wonderful.
We are
9:15,
very
we did it.
grateful. As Jami mentioned, it really does matter for youth to know that adults are listening to them, that adults are there for them. And as part of the community at St. John's, you do have a lot of youth in your lives. So please do what you can to make sure that our youth know you're here for them, you're available for them, and that you can help them find amazing resources as well. So thank you so much for being here. And again, a huge thank you to Jami. I'm so grateful to know more about Youth on Record and the work that y'all are doing. So thank you all.